What's up, guys? It's Damp. I want to take you through some of the basic setups that you have in this game for newer players, because there are so many players, unfortunately, that are getting broken off or losing their gear, breaking rods, breaking reels. And I want to be able to make a video that helps the newer players that are just getting started, or maybe if you don't know a lot about fishing. So, um, I'm not going to go through a lot of the dynamics of why and the energy transfer and some of those things with how it works, but I'm going to give you an idea on where you have to be when you initially set these up. And as you begin to get better and better gear, you can look at challenging those limits, but do not do it until you're very familiar with the game and probably partner with a higher level player, because so many people are going off of some information in which it says they can double or push the limits of their gear, and unfortunately they don't have the quality gear to be able to do that. So I kind of want to explain what's happening. So first of all, let's talk about how you need to set your gear up. So as you're setting up your fishing tackle, you need to set it up so that your fishing line is essentially the weakest part, or your hook. Truthfully, your hook could be, but the fishing line needs to be the weakest part of your setup. So as we look at the setups that you're probably going to grow to eventually, this is a Telestick TL16. It's one of the most affordable gain or telescopic rods that you can get early on in the game. So as we look at this, we're going to click this little I button here, and you're going to see you've got the parameters of the rod. What we're looking for is load capacity. You'll see here that the load capacity is 4.5 kilograms. So with a telescopic rod, you need to make sure that you're under that. Sometimes you want to be under it substantially. I'm just kind of showing you a setup right now that's going to kind of push it to its limit, but you probably want to give it a little bit of room, because it isn't going to have a lot of line that will slack, and you won't have a reel in order to control some of that force that's going to be applied to the rod, because most of the energy is going to go directly to the rod itself. So as you kind of look at what you want to have set up here, because the load capacity is 4.5 kilograms, we need to be under that. And we probably could be under it a little bit more. This is probably, like if you were to do something around 3 kilograms would be even more safe. This is probably a little too light, but around 3 kilograms would probably be ideal for this type of setup. Especially in the lower lakes, you're really not going to get fish that are going to be probably 2 to 3 kilogram, unless you happen to get a common carp. But either way, we're looking at the load capacity here. 3.9 is under where we need to be at 4.5. The rest of this stuff doesn't matter as much outside of the quality of the hook. If we were to look at some of the lower ended hooks, so for example, these red ones are a low star or low quality hook. That's what I mean by that. Doesn't have very many stars. The hooks can actually break before the line in the rod as well, so that's another fail-safe mechanism you can utilize. Now you have to be using really low quality hooks in order for that to happen. So if you're in an area where you're looking to catch fish, but you know there's bigger carp, and you want another mechanism to make sure you don't get broken off, buy the lowest quality hook that you can. Unfortunately, that's going to make it harder for you to hook some of the fish that you're truthfully targeting. So there is that caveat there. But the hook can be something that can break off with, I've only seen it really done in telescopic rods and float systems. I haven't seen it done with the feeder rods, but I'm sure it's possible. Because the meter that's on the bottom of the screen, if I walk out here and I cast, I'll kind of go through it with you guys. So the meter that's on the bottom of the screen is not just your line. Essentially what it is this little bar that shows up on the bottom. That bar that you see there that has the 3 little icons above it, that bar, the tension that you see there is essentially the lowest common denominator, or the item that's going to break first. That could be your hook, it could be your line, it could be your rod. It just depends on your setup and the variables within it. But keep that in mind. Some people are like, oh, it's not, I can't believe it's breaking my line. Well, it's not necessarily. It might be breaking your rod if that's the item that's the weakest part of your setup. So just as we're looking at the next setup, that's what I want you guys to keep in mind. So when you're seeing that, and you're pushing the limits knowing that you have a high, you know, let's say you have your line is the strongest part, then that bar isn't a reflection of your line. It's probably your rod or your reel, which means you're going to break something rather quickly. So as we move on to another setup, I'll show you one more. This is a light tackle spinning setup. So as we look at our setup here, you can see our load capacity on our rod is 14.5. It's pretty high. It's actually probably too high for this setup, but this is one of those that has bonus XP. So you can see here it limits the reel sizes that you can utilize. So without spending a ton of money, this rod setup is truthfully a little imbalanced, but just to give you an example of what it is, so our load capacity is 14.5 kilograms. That means our line, our reel, everything has to be under 14.5, and probably should be under by a little bit, because truthfully your rod needs to be the strongest piece, your reel is the second strongest piece, and your line is your third strongest piece. That's the way these should be set up as you move on to spinning and casting tackle. So as we look at our load capacity, 14.5 kilograms, our reel has a 6 kilogram max drag, which is, you know, like I said, it's a little too light. Ideally, we'd probably want to be around somewhere between 9 and 11 on our kilograms of our reel, in my opinion. And then as we look at the line, you can see here it's 5 kilograms. It's less than the reel. So you have rod, reel, line in that order. Strongest, second, third. And again, you have the rest of the setup here that's left. If we look at one more, let's see, I'll just throw out, here's a feeder rod. So looking at this feeder rod, you can see our load capacity is 19.5 for the strength of the rod. The reel is at 14, so again, strongest, second strongest, and then third strongest is the line. Now again, this line is at 13 kilograms. Probably would like it to be maybe a little bit lighter than that as a newer player, but what I was talking about before, like this is how I'd recommend when you set it up as a newer player. As you begin to get some of the higher quality gear, so I'll give you an example. Like these Saber 60s are what a lot of people move towards, and they're 3.5 stars. That's pretty good gear. Where a lot of people are starting to get broken off is this Spark. This is plastic. Essentially what this is this is a reel that you would get in America at Walmart. That's their own brand, or like the Spider-Man reels that you get as a child, or the Barbie reels. That's what this essentially equates to. So as you're looking at some of those videos that say, hey, you can go to this max drag is 3 kilogram, you can go up to 6. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Stay at 2. That's where you need to stay. Stay at about 2 kilograms, maybe 2.5. Don't go any higher. Because this is a very low quality setup. It's basically plastic, and I don't know, I would say it's probably plastic. That's what most of the Walmart ones are. And then a lot of people will move to these two guys here. So you can see you're still at 1.5 stars there. Still at 1.5 stars here. So this gear, again, is not quality. It's entry level, like economy type stuff. So do not push the limits. If it says 5.5, go 4.5 to 5 at most. And that's really where you're going to start as a newer player. Now, as you move into the Saber 60s, and it says, hey, your max drag's 9, okay, maybe you're going to go to 10 or 11, maybe. But I wouldn't ever recommend going over 50% of what your max drag is at any time, no matter how high the quality is. And I'm using, you know, the ADS, and I'm not, you know, the highest player in the game, but even with the ADS, by using line that's that much higher, I'll tell you, I'm damaging my gear, and there really isn't that big of a payoff. By using reel that's right around that size of what the reel is, it, in my opinion, it leads to more bites and more strikes, and that's just, you know, my feedback. But I'll tell you, the advantage I get by having line that's heavier is I'm able to stop some of those fish from running with that heavier line, with, you know, that are kind of close to shore, like the pike in Quarry Lake in that one spot. You guys know where I'm talking about if you're a higher level player. But that's the main reason I use it. I found that it probably works better to run the thinner line, where you're able to have more line on the reel to stop from getting spooled. Because the heavier line you use on a reel, the more likely you are to be spooled. Just keep that in mind. because you're going to have less line on that reel. So as you look at some of your parameters of a reel, you can see there the line capacity. The heavier your line goes, like the 0.42 millimeter is heavier than the 0.32 millimeter because it's thicker. That's what that means. The heavier you go, the less line you get on that reel. And I would say probably I've been taken all the way out to 250 to 300 meters on some of my spools as I go to Quarry Lake and you run into some of the lake trout. Quarry char, lake trout, even pike. Some of the pike have almost spooled me that far. So anyway, as you get to the higher quality gear where you have higher stars, you're a lot more likely to be able to push those limits. But you can't push those limits for a long time. You're typically talking, level 16 to level 20. By that time, you have a better idea of what your gear looks like. You have much better understanding of the game mechanics and what you can and can't do. So until you get to that point where you're running a Saber 60, and even then I wouldn't recommend it. Bare minimum, the Saber 60. Even the Adriatic, I wouldn't push it. It's only 2.5 stars, so I really wouldn't push it there. So hopefully that helps you guys, and that helps a lot of people from getting broken off. If you have anything you want to add in the comments, please do. Thanks for watching, and thanks for all the support on the Twitch streams with RF4 lately. Thanks, guys. See you.